Hi, this is Christine with Ziedman Development. Today I'd like to walk you through using Importacular and the prospect destination in order to import to the prospect module in Razor's Edge. I'm beginning on a prospect tab for the prospect module in Razor's Edge to show you the areas that this video will cover. So because the prospect module and the prospect destination are pretty complex and work with a wide range of types of data, I've divided this module and destination into two separate videos. This video is going to cover this general area where you can import the classification and prospect status, as well as philanthropic interests and areas that a donor is not interested in. It's also going to look at gifts to other organizations, so you can map all of that information and import it in. We can work with our financial information as well as our ratings. Proposals will be covered elsewhere, and the financial information graph and chronology are not fields that you can import into because they're summaries of information that already exists within this module. So just as a reminder, before we open Importacular, you do need to have your code tables set up, particularly for your ratings. So as you're working with the prospect destination in Importacular, you do need to set up those ratings before you do your first import, because those have to be set up really specifically. They're a little bit more like an attribute than they are just a code table. So make sure you've gone in and you've set that up before you do your first import. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up Importacular so that we can take a look at an existing template. So we've opened Importacular, and I've already opened it to the tab for the prospect mappings. But just as a reminder, if you're opening your template and creating it for the first time, you will need to start with a constituent. So if that's not something that you've done before, I would encourage you to watch our Getting Started playlist. Make sure that you feel very comfortable in getting started with setting up that constituent, adding any contact information that's relevant, and anything else that needs to come into this template so you can get started with it from there, and then come back to this video so that you can add the prospect information from your data source. One of the things to notice is that our prospect data mappings don't line up exactly with those tabs that we saw in the prospect module in Razor's Edge. So there's a little bit of a difference between what these are labeled and what the tabs there are labeled. So you kind of need to know where these different pieces live in order to work with them. So if we were starting with that general area, the areas that we would see there are that classification and that status and their philanthropic interests, as well as the areas they would not give to. So in order to get to those areas, we would begin with this prospect mapping. So if I open the prospect mapping, you'll see here we've got that classification and that status. We would then also want to work with their philanthropic interests. So when we open that, you can see this interest code. I've chosen to use a source field because I had a field within my data source that told me what their philanthropic interest was. If I didn't, and I had a default value that would be true for every constituent, I could have chosen that as well. I can also add a comment if I would like, and there are some field settings that we could use in order to translate that data and make it work within the system. Similar to those philanthropic interests are the things that a donor will not give to. So these two fields do share the same interest code table. They just show up in two different places when you open that prospect module in Razor's Edge. So you can see on this one, I did assign a default value saying that none of the constituents in my import are willing to give to a religious organization. That may or may not be true, so I may not want to use a default value. If I knew that everyone felt the same way and that none of them wanted to give to a religious organization, this mapping would work perfectly. But if I don't know for sure, I'd be better off to work with a source field that tells me specific areas that donors don't want to give to. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And just to show you, the area settings for both the interests, for the philanthropic interests, and the won't give to are similar. So they work with allowing you to say what happens if there is a match to that interest code. So when we choose that first option, it's going to add this no matter what, whether or not this code already exists in Razor's Edge. The second option is going to update the value in Raiser's Edge. So because the only fields here are the code and a comments field, what that means is whatever comments are in Raiser's Edge are going to be replaced by the comments in your field. So you can choose that if that's what you would like to happen. The final option is to ignore this if there's a match and not change anything in Raiser's Edge. Next, I'd like to walk through our prospect financial information. So I've got one set up here for real estate. So you can see that in my file, I had an amount for real estate. I have a date where that information was acquired. I don't have a date for it to be assessed. I do have an information source and I have an information type. I did not have notes. So you would fill all of these in accordance to what information you have available to you and how you want that to work within Raiser's Edge. This does have a few different options for those area settings. So your match can be related to a bit more than just that initial type that we worked with. We can also work with those gifts to other organizations. So here you can map that amount of what was given, the date of when it was given. You can add a comment, you can add a reason, and you can add an organization name and an organization type. Please do note that this organization name is not going to link to an organization within your database. It is simply a text field that will put that organization's name on this gift. So I have typed in a default value because I didn't have a field in my file for that. But if you have a field in your file, that's what that will do, is it will create a text listing of that name of that organization. And we do have a couple of options here for area settings. So again, you can choose what to do when this information matches something on this tab of gifts to other organizations, and you can choose what constitutes a match there. The last thing I'd like to show you are some ratings mappings. So the ratings are usually codes that show you what a score would be for this person. It can also be a capacity rating or maybe even a range of a capacity. So you're going to need to have a category and a date. Those are required fields. But generally, you also really do need a description, because without a description, you have no way to know how they actually rated. So the category is just going to label what type of rating it is. The description is actually going to say what that rating is. So if our pro score is a number between 1 and 4, 1 being very unlikely to give, 4 being very likely to give, just having a category of pro score and a date isn't going to tell me that somebody ranked as a 4 of very likely to give. So I do need that description to be filled in, because that description would be what says that number between 1 through 4. You can also add notes in a source if that information is helpful for you. And again, we do have those area settings so that you can determine what constitutes a match. Just so you can see a different example of a pro score, or of a rating score, you can see here we have an affinity score. It's got similar fields set up, but it does have a different category, so it's going to have a different type of rating when you open it on that constituent prospect tab. I hope that this has been helpful for you as we look at how to map these ratings in different fields within the prospect destination. Thanks and have a great day.